The Rebel Capitalist Show.
You know, I hear a lot of people talk about how, well, you got to go into stocks because we've got reflation, we've got inflation, but your hedge there is going to be stocks. But whenever I hear that, I always think back to 1972 to 1974, to where the stock market went down by 50% in nominal terms when we had the worst bout of inflation that we've ever seen in U.S. history, or one of them, you know, in the modern history, I should say. So how do you view stocks as an inflation hedge?
You're exactly right that this story, this argument you're hearing is 50 years old. That we made the exact same argument that stocks are the perfect hedge for inflation in the late 60s and early 70s.
Mm,
And you're right that on an inflation adjusted basis, they got murdered between 72 and 74. And
even in nominal terms, even in nominal terms.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I've looked at the inflation adjusted chart a lot. Inflation adjusted stocks peaked in 1968. They bottomed in 1982, losing 70% of their value.
Right.
They did not take out the 1968 high till 1993. It took 30 years almost to take out that. Now, why is it that stocks turned out to not be a good inflation target? Because with stocks, with a company, you've got two sides of the equation. You've got your product, which you can raise your price on, and you've got your raw material inputs, either labor or materials that you'd use
or
to
capital,
make your product. Or capital too.
At 18% interest rates.
Right. And what happened is, in what happened then, and what I suppose will always happen is your input costs, your raw material, your capital, your labor will go up faster than you can raise your prices. Your margins will get squeezed. You won't have a margin. You might even go to a negative margin, which is what some of these companies did, and you get murdered. So the argument that you make that stocks are a hedge is labor is going to go up in price and capital is going to go up, you know, interest rates are going to go up and raw material prices are going to go up. But don't worry, I can raise the price of my product faster than those prices are going to go up, maintaining my margin. It's never worked that way. The finished good product can't go, you almost never goes up faster than the raw materials because the finished good product is dependent upon consumers purchasing it, and they're getting squeezed. They don't have the demand to watch those prices go up. Otherwise, if this worked, every country that's ever tried to inflate their way out, think Venezuela, Zimbabwe, the Reichsmark, whatever you want, all that would have worked. It would have always worked every time, but it never works that way because the raw prices go up and the margins wind up going negative. So if you get inflation, then I suspect that you would see a big squeeze in margins as we move forward from here. Yeah, in the PEs, right? PEs are dependent upon margin. You know,
right.
if you look at margins in PEs, there's a direct relationship with them. When you have big fat margins, you have very high PEs. When you have narrow margins or negative margins, you have very, very low PEs. It's a reason why the PE in the market in 1982 was 5 or 6. But now the PE in the market's in the mid 20s. And that's concerning because if we are approaching an inflation period, this market is not priced for that at all.
Yeah, but when you're talking about wages in the 1970s and that whole kind of domino effect, if you will, I'm thinking through what's happening today with the government competing with entrepreneurs for workers, and all these workers on the sidelines saying, well, okay, I was making, let's say $12 an hour, but now the government is paying me $20 an hour. So in order for Chipotle or whatever, I'm just throwing this out there, they're going to have to offer $20 an hour, $25 an hour, or something like that. And most people who don't have much experience with businesses think that, oh, well, that's no big deal. They'll just have to pay that out of their profits. You know, the owner of the business is just some fat cat that's lighting his cigars with $100 bills. But they don't realize that most of those small and mid-sized businesses that are the growth engine of the U.S. economy, they run on like 5% margins, like sub 10% margins, very, very low margins. So there's not enough wiggle room in the profit in order to pay some, or in order to increase wages by, call it 80%. or something like that. So how do you see that playing out right now, contrasting that to what we saw and what you pointed out in the 1970s?
Well, first of all, you're right on a couple of things. I think I'm right on this number. 75-ish% of the US workforce works for a company of less than 100 employees. And it might even be less than 50 employees as well, too. So, yes, the big growth engine is everybody works for a small company, or the majority of people work for the small companies. And if you look at big companies, companies that employ 5,000 people or more, they have not created a new net job since 1980, 41 years, because they employ technology and efficiencies and they reduce their overhead. GM, employs 1/7 the number of people now that it did in 1980 and produces more cars because it's all robots that make the cars. So it's definitely, when we talk about the fat cat, well, the fat cat's that guy that runs a company of, he might run a fast food place and that might be 50 or 75 people. And, he's probably has a decent living, but I don't think he's jetting off to Aspen in a private jet. He's not at that. It's not at that level. He's not launching himself into space. To talk about fat cats, and stuff. So when you talk about, well, he could pay $20 an hour. Okay, if that's going to be the entry level job, then everybody else in that organization gets a raise. Because if you're going to pay the guy $20 an hour that walks in off the street, I'm not going to, and I've been here for 6 months. Why am I getting $21 or $22 an hour? I should be getting 25. And the guy that was getting 25 has been there a year. It's like, why am I getting the same amount of money and he's been here half the time? I should be getting 30. And that whole scale goes all the way up and the costs go up. And what's the other thing we sort of believe about wages? I say believe because we've never tested it, that wages only go one way, right? When you raise wages to get people in, to get everybody back to work, you can't go back and say, okay, well, business slowed down, I have to cut your pay. That's very difficult. If you cut pay, you destroy morale, you destroy any kind of culture you have, you encourage people to look for other jobs. And what usually happens is your best employees find jobs because they're employable and you're stuck with all the unemployable ones as well, too. So that's why companies are very, very hesitant to raise wages. So we're stuck right now in a difficult spot. We've got a labor shortage in this country. Because there's a lot of jobs that are going begging right now. Famously, back in May, a bunch of restaurants in St. Louis held a job fair, and they were advertising that they had over 100 jobs, and they all banded together in a job fair. 12 people showed up to the job fair.
Yeah.
And I know
I've heard about companies paying people just to come fill out an application.
Yes. There's a Walgreens in my neighborhood, and they've got a little table there, and they say to sign up for a job interview, and they'll give you a gift certificate just to take a gift card, just to take a job interview and stuff. So they're trying to get people in the door. So this is unusual. We haven't seen this. I mean, you tell me, when's the last time we saw people begging for work this badly, that they're willing to pay people
begging
to
for
take
workers?
Workers, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And to some extent, a lot of people that are unemployed, yeah, I should get a job, but maybe next week, because I could get a job anytime I want. So I don't feel a sense of urgency to get a job. Now, what's controversial about this is a lot of people think it's that extra $300 a week of unemployment. And 25 states, starting in early June, 25 states, all Republican states, ended the $300. And there's other 25 states that still offer it, and those are largely Democrat or blue states. The data on that's mixed. Now, it might be because it's only a handful of weeks, but if you look at the employment patterns in the states that ended the $300 versus the employment pattern in the states that didn't, there's not much difference. And if that's the case, what I think that means is all this stimulus money is people are out there with the stimulus money buying stuff. I want to buy stuff with this stimulus money, and they're driving demand, and they don't feel a need to get a job right away. that we're going to have to pay them more. And then now we're back to the argument about margins get squeezed and inflation becomes more non-transitory because it becomes more, wages going up and stuff. We're at the precipice of that now. And then there's one other thing I'll throw out in this other big picture too. And this really goes to boomer managers. And I'm talking to you boomer managers out there. And I'm a boomer. I think I'm a boomer. I'm a Gen X boomer there. People don't like the office and they don't want to go back to the office. And we're having this debate about got to get everybody back to the office. And I've joked, and I'm in Chicago, so I'll use the example in Chicago, and it applies anywhere, right? We got Wrigley Field where the Cubs play. And there will be a game there this afternoon, and there will be 41,000 maskless people stuffed into there. The bars will be overflowing. The subway will be overflowing. The bars on Friday night in Chicago are overflowing. But then if you tell people, yeah, that big office tower in the center of the city on the 38th floor is your office, when are you going to go back there? Oh, it's a health risk. I can't go back there. Oh, but you have no problem stuffing yourself into 40,000 people in a baseball stadium and riding a subway train to get there. But that office tower is going to kill you. No, you don't want to go back. Because here's the thing. Everybody that says we got to get back to the office is usually in the upper echelons of the company. The office is structured for them. They like the office. It's for them. But the majority of people that work in your office are usually administrative, clerical, or operations. The office isn't anything special for them. They kind of liked being at home for the last year as well, too. And they don't want to go back. Yeah, they'll go back once or twice a week to have some FaceTime and see some meetings, but they don't want to go back 5 days a week. So we're going to have a real issue here as to why do we have an office? Well, it used to be that was where all the resources were to do your job. Now, look at you and me. The resources to do this are on our computer, if not our phone, as well, too. And we don't necessarily need that big, expensive office tower in the middle of a big, expensive city to do a lot of this work. So the nature of work itself, I think, is under a review. But the problem is too many boomer managers are like, no, we got to get back to 2019. We got to get everybody back to the office 5 days a week as fast as humanly possible. And the reality, you want to go back because you're in the upper echelons of the company, but not everybody else wants to. And that could be hugely deflationary for commercial real estate. If everybody realizes they have way too much office space and they don't need as much because we go to some kind of hybrid version of working as well, too. It could be a big, big problem for the economy because commercial real estate is a big part of this economy.